Hello everyone, I am Devansh. Today I am going to discuss the Microeconomics midterm paper. This test was designed to test whether we can connect our textbook microeconomics concepts with what is actually happening around us, like subsidies, demand shifts, price surges, and consumer behavior. In short, it is less about memorizing graphs and more about explaining real-world economics in action. Let's break it down. So the first question is that middle class household is consuming wheat and rice, and suddenly the rice subsidy is dropped by the government, which makes it 25% more expensive, while the income of the household remains constant. Now first we have to understand the basic formula that price effect is equal to substitution effect plus income effect. And since the income has remained constant, wheat is more affordable now, and hence the consumption of wheat will increase due to this. However, if rice is a given good, then the situation is different because the substitution effect is far more than the income effect, and hence the person or the household will be forced to buy more of the rice instead of consuming wheat. Moving to question number 2. Suppose in 2025 the government makes electric vehicle two-wheelers cheaper by 15,000. It's a great move. However, the lithium prices rise due to export restrictions and rising demand, which makes it harder for the suppliers to produce. We have to analyze the situation from the demand and supply perspective. A subsidy on electric two vehicles effectively lowers the purchase price for consumers, making the vehicles more affordable. This causes an increase in the quantity demanded because the market equilibrium price paid by the consumers decreases, but the sellers receive a higher price than the buyers pay. Electric vehicles market expands as a result due to more units being sold. However, lithium is a key input for electric vehicle batteries. When its prices rise for manufacturers, the supply curve shifts leftwards or upwards, indicating that a decrease in supply at every price level. Market price rises and the quantity sold decreases in isolation. In the diagram, we can see that the demand has increased. However, the supply has decreased as well, and hence the final price paid by the consumer can increase or decrease based on the equilibrium set by both of these factors. The supply decreases, making it costlier for production. Equilibrium price increases. The demand increases due to the subsidy, due to which the equilibrium prices rise. In other words, the subsidy can mitigate but not fully offset a strong supply shock. Thus, the price may still increase compared to the starting equilibrium. Now, what are the possible unintended consequences of this policy intervention in both short and the long term? In the short term, excess demand or shortages can happen. So, if the subsidy puts upward pressure on the demand and supply cannot match due to the lithium shortages, there may be waiting lists, black markets, or unavailability. Resource misallocation could also happen, such as subsidies could encourage purchase by customers who do not buy otherwise, potentially crowding more cost-efficient users. This can also put a financial burden on the government because they will have to shell out more to give subsidy to the increasing demand. In the long run, the dependence on subsidy can increase. The producers and the consumers may get used to the lower prices, and they would have wanted more and more subsidies from the government in the coming years. Moving on to the third question. The question asks us for a brief economic analysis of the Indian onion price spike in 2019 and 2023, when the prices jumped to about 150 rupees per kilo from the usual 30 to 40 rupees. It wants an explanation using price elasticity and consumer behavior of how different income groups reacted, contrasting middle class urban consumers and low income rural households who cut consumption and substituted with cheaper vegetables. It also asked to assess the effects of a 60 rupees per kilo price ceiling done by the government to stop this rise in prices. Analysis using the price elasticity of demand and consumer behavior. We have to understand what is price elasticity. Price elasticity measures how the quantity demanded of a good responds to the change in its price. For onions, in India, demand is relatively inelastic. Even with high price increases, the quantity demanded does not fall drastically because onions are a staple in most Indian diets. The consumer behavior theory states that the consumer adapts based on their income levels and their preferences. Middle class urban consumers have higher disposable incomes. That means that even if the prices rise, they contribute to purchasing onions, though they may reduce the quantity slightly or absorb the price by increasing their monthly budgets. They may be more loyal to the familiar tastes and less to the substitute of onion, like cabbages, thus showing less sensitivity to the price changes. However, the low-income households have low purchasing power and the price surge will significantly impact them. They are more likely to substitute onions with cheaper vegetables like cabbages or turnip, which may reduce overall consumption. Their demand is more elastic because a large share of their income is spent on basic foods, so they must adapt more. The behavior responses can be that many restaurants and eateries reduce their onion usage or increase the menu prices, and some can even switch to alternatives. The low-income consumers can adjust their consumption patterns more significantly as compared to the high-income individuals. With a price ceiling put on by the government sets some legal maximum price, 60 rupees per kilo, below the equilibrium price, which is 150 rupees per kilo based on the supply and demand. However, at lower price, since the quantity of demand increases, that is, people want to buy more at a cheaper rate, but the quantity supplied decreases because the suppliers receive less profit, so there is less incentive for the suppliers to make onions or the farmers to create or farm onions. This can lead to unlikely consequences. This can lead to shortages. Some consumers may find it harder to get onions at that price. Black markets may emerge. Onions may be sold at illicitly high prices, higher than even 150 rupees per kilo. There can be distorted markets. Farmers earn less. This affects the future supply and possibly pushing more and more producers out of producing onion. Market-based, what can be the future alternatives to manage this? Supply chain improvements and buffer stocks. The government should invest in modern storage and logistics to minimize wastage and stabilize the supply throughout the year. They have to maintain buffer stocks to release in the open market during shortages to balance the prices. Crop diversification and insurance are another key factor which they should think of. They should encourage the farmers to diversify crops and take insurance against weather to stabilize their income as well. So that's how this microeconomics paper ties subsidies, budgets, EV policies and onions into one story. Everyday life is full of economic trade-offs. So next time when you complain about Netflix, petrol or onions, just remember that when you're living the demand and supply graph in real time. See you next time.